Well, something that is not hula hands is Hootie and the Blowfish. Although I feel
Hootie!
like they played at some pretty
They probably
divey
played
bars
in
as
a
well.
hula hands
Yeah.
on the PA or whatever.
I think Darius Rucker started the hula hands. Yeah.
But it's
All right.
over.
Hootie and the Blowfish Cracked Rear Review comes in at number 669 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 81 in 1994, number 3,875 of all time. It is Hootie and the Blowfish's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. Did not make Rolling Stone's list, and Hootie and the Blowfish are ranked number 2,550 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. So, fellas, I believe this is the first and only time we are covering Hootie. I don't think I saw Fairweather Johnson on the show running list there. So we'll go through the whole bio here. Well, some of it anyway. So the genres of Hootie and the Blowfish include pop rock, alternative rock, soft rock, roots rock, heartland rock, and jangle pop. They were influenced by artists such as R.E.M., Bob Seger, Elton John, John Mellencamp, Otis Redding, Stevie Wonder, Van Morrison, Bruce Springsteen, and Sam Cooke. And both their highest charting albums included both Cracked Rear View and Fairweather Johnson, what's this sophomore effort. They both reached number 1 on the Billboard charts. Their highest charting single is Only Want to Be With You from this record. That reached number 6 on the Billboard charts. And so, yeah, this is their debut album. They have a total of 6. Their most recent was 2019's Imperfect Circle. And Cracked Rear View was released on July 5th, 1994. A little background on the band. They were formed in Columbia, South Carolina in 1986 when Darius Rucker, he's the lead singer and guitarist, met guitarist Mark Bryan when they were students at the University of South Carolina. And apparently, Mark Bryan heard Darius Rucker singing in the shower in their dorm and was impressed with what he heard. And that's kind of what... I don't know. I don't think he approached him right then and there in the shower, but maybe, later on in the afternoon, whatever. They started chatting, and they formed a band called the Wolf Brothers, where they played mostly covers. Soon after this, they had bassist Dean Felber join the band, as well as drummer Brantley Smith. And then they changed their name to Hootie and the Blowfish. Does anybody know where these names come from, where the name Hootie and the Blowfish comes from?
No.
Absolutely no idea.
I do remember hearing this. They were actually nicknames of friends of theirs in college. One of their friends was nicknamed Hootie because of the large eyeglasses that he wore, kind of reminded them of an owl. And the Blowfish was a friend of theirs who had puffed out cheeks, or puffy cheeks, and his name was the Blowfish. So that was, it's also been roundly noted as one of the worst band names ever. Whenever those lists come out, the Hootie and the Blowfish is on that list. So there you go. So the drummer Smith left the band after they graduated to pursue music ministry. Very specific thing there. I guess wanted to do music ministry.
It's like
just
Christian
not
rock.
Christian rock, or like maybe just like work in the church as the organist or something. I don't know, maybe a band there or something. So he was replaced by Jim Sonefeld, who goes by the name Sony, and so that basically makes the classic lineup of Hootie and the Blowfish, and really the only lineup of Hootie and the Blowfish, because they're all still in the band today. So the band was signed to Atlantic Records in 1993 by Tim Summer. After he heard their EP by the name of Coochie Pop, and I guess that was a rare thing, because most labels didn't want to sign them because they were so different from the dominating sounds of like alternative and grunge that were really hogging the airwaves there. So this record cost $200,000 to make, which was nothing compared to how much it made for the band and the label. This was a massive hit. It's actually, I read that it was the 19th best-selling album in the United States of all time, and the 61st best-selling album overall for the entire world. So it sold over 22 million copies. It did reach number 1 on the Billboard charts 5 different times in 1995.
Wow.
And it was the best-selling album of that year in 1995. It's another one of those albums where it kind of had a lot of lasting, staying power on the charts. They had 5 singles. The first one, "Hold My Hand," was released in July 1994, and the final single, "Drowning," was released in November of 1995. So, yeah, good year and a half on the charts. Funny story coming out of this: Hootie and the Blowfish and Bob Dylan reached an out-of-court settlement for what Dylan's camp called an unauthorized use of Bob Dylan's lyrics in their song Only Want to Be With You. If you guys paid attention to that, you may have noticed them aping the lyrics from some of the lyrics from Idiot Wind, which was on Blood on the Tracks, an album that we covered back in the day. According to Darius Rucker, he actually reached out to the Dylan's management to give them the heads up. Hey, I got these lyrics in here on our song that we're going to be using, and he made sure that was okay. He said that they didn't reject that they were fine, that they put the song out, and then all of a sudden they blew up, right? Because at the time nobody knew who Hootie and the Blowfish was. Said that they played it for years, they had a really big hit, and then Dylan's camp all of a sudden said they want some money out of it, and so they reportedly paid Bob Dylan $350,000 for this. Which is amazing because it's literally like 3 lines that, all Darius Rucker needed to do was write different lines and he could have had $350,000 in his pocket still. So, this album did get the band a couple Grammys, one for best pop performance by a duo or group with vocals for Hold My Hand, and they won a Grammy for best new artist. These were both in the 1996 Grammy Awards. Over the years, they have released several other albums. 2008, they went on hiatus so Rucker could focus on a solo career in country music, so he's got a couple of solo records. And the band's also known for being very much into charity. They've done several different, variety of different concerts and events for charity, including relief efforts for hurricanes, benefits for animal shelters. They played for the USO. They have an annual golf tournament that they run, apparently, that goes to local charities, and also supporting anti-racist organizations, just to name a few. So very, very nice guys, those Hootie and the Blowfish guys. So there you go. So a little history there. And Josh, let's start with you. What do you think of Hootie and the Blowfish's Cracked Rear View?
Well, this was an album I was familiar with. This is going to be one of the few albums in the 90s that we cover that my parents owned. So I remember listening to it on, I think it was tape in the car a lot. It was on the radio. All the songs were on the radio all the time. I remember that. And I feel like a lot, as time passed, kind of Hootie and the Blowfish was kind of probably the butt of jokes in terms of not being talented or being overrated, or who knows, just like kind of an epitome of music in the 90s, maybe something like that. But listening to the album this week, I came to it with pretty fresh ears, and outside of knowing the singles on this, Hold My Hand, Only Want to Be With You, in Time especially, I thought it was a pretty enjoyable album. It's not reinventing the wheel or anything. I think Darius Rucker, I agree with that guy that heard him singing in the shower. He has a good voice, and that is, often strength enough alone to carry a band. I think they have a kind of feel-good acoustic sound to them. They're not reinventing the wheel or anything. And then I think they effectively insert some instruments in different songs, like the organ kind of plays a backup role in a couple of these songs effectively. I like the violin on Running from an Angel, and the violin makes an appearance later on as well. And it's just kind of this, I guess you could say wholesome, but it's just kind of this feel-good acoustic southern twinged rock and roll. Would I go back to this? Probably not, but I'm not it was fun to listen to it with my wife, and she liked this. She knew the songs also, and I don't know. It was a nice change of pace, like you said, Matt, when the A&R rep or whoever found them. I feel like that's why the appeal was there for the millions of people that bought this. It's not grungy at all. It's not kind of electric guitar, and it's one of those kind of lighters that you hold up in the air concert type of songs throughout that you would you could bring your whole family to. And so is this mind-blowing? No. Is it like a discovery? No. But I'd rather listen to this than Dave Matthews Band. So thumbs up for me on this one. Mild thumbs up.
It's funny you put those two together, because in some ways, I think they occupied a same spot in my music consciousness. I will give the context for me with Hootie and the Blowfish. up until this week, I had never listened to the album Cracked Rear View.
Okay.
I was aware of it. I was aware of 4 songs on this album that, Hold My Hand, Let Her Cry, Only Want to Be With You, and Time, right? So I felt like I knew half the album coming in, but I remember vaguely liking Let Her Cry a little bit. I wouldn't say liking, but like processing it as something I didn't hate. The other 3 songs I actively disliked, and I processed them when they came out as I didn't quite know how to describe it, but I would later say like frat rock. They're in cargo shorts and backwards hats and t-shirts, and like they deeply sell themselves as like everymen, which in the punk sense can be appealing to me, but like as a rock band, I just feel like I don't really want rock bands to be just like me. Even like punk bands that are kind of doing it, like I want them to be like angrier than I am or more aggressive than I am. Like I don't necessarily, it isn't always a positive thing for me to say, oh, like this dude would be a guy I'd drink at like, Rats down at like the SEC like bar, like, which is the vibe I always, but like a lot of things, I'm like, all right, don't think I would have ever visited Cracked Rear View on my own, but we're going to go ahead and do it. And at the beginning, I thought I was going to change my mind, guys, because the first song, Hannah Jane, I was like, ooh, this is like a Gin Blossom song. And I famously like the Gin Blossoms, who have some elements of Hootie, and maybe I'm a little bit of a hypocrite, and that like when the Gin Blossoms gave me sort of straight ahead jangle rock, I liked it. And so I was like, after Hannah Jane, I was like, all right, if it's like this, then I was sleeping on Hootie and the Blowfish. Unfortunately, it wasn't like that the rest of the way. It became the, cargo shorts, backwards hat type of rock, I would imagine. The music itself was fine. Not quite country, not quite alt rock is not a great lane for me. Like to me, if you're going to go country rock, you got to go like Skinnerd or All In, right? Like, or Almonds, you know what I mean? And I want to see like guitar virtuoso-ness. I want to see like good old boy shit, but like the good old boy shit where it's like I might get arrested, like good old boy shit, you know what I mean? Or just down home, not like, I watch the Dolphins on Sunday and go to a mega church and, and just as it went on, like Darius Rucker's voice kind of wears on me after a while, in the same way that sometimes Nashville country voices wear on me after hearing 10 songs, and the lyrics just do not speak to me, guys. It's like, it's the lyrics of like, driving a minivan in the suburbs and having a really fucking boring life and having boring relationships with women that are like emotionally profound for you, but there's nothing from the outside that's like, when I see someone who like falls apart in their romantic relationships, I want it to like resonate in a way that is intense, right? Not like you're all in your feelings and it's like, well, fuck, like I don't care, and that's like all these songs are kind of like that. It's like I don't care. And like what I would describe it is that Razzmatazz song last week by Pulp, right? Like I felt that song like as a breakup song, so I like knew that experience. I liked the fact that it had some edge to it and he wasn't a super likable protagonist, and like he was aware of that, right? And he was kind of a dick, but also he kind of was wronged. Like this is sort of like sad fuck, like feel bad for me type songs. And after a while it's just like, it's like the people that you meet who are a couple and you're kind of like, ugh, like they're fine, but you don't really want to hang out with them. And that's like that's kind of how I'd describe this album. It's like part frat boy, part like when I go to a party nowadays with people with kids and they're lovely people and great neighbors, but you have the same conversation 5 times with them. And that's who I felt like was listening to Hootie and the Blowfish. And since lots of people in the world are that person, like it makes sense that it sold like a bajillion albums, right? I will say my parents have a completely different experience. Like my dad hated Hootie and the Blowfish upon first listen, and my mom, I can definitely remember saying, this band's not for me kind of along the way. So it did not win over my two parents. It's funny, like as time goes on, like my dad fashions himself as the edgier music guy, but I kind of realized like it falls off the cliff for him in the mid 80s. And my mom, who doesn't fashion herself the indie person, is the person who, like, when we do the like 90s rock quizzes, can like immediately like name all the Nirvana songs by name and like knows tons of singles, you know what I mean? Like was able to pull Marilyn Manson one time, like with different stuff. So it's kind of fun, but like this did not pierce either of their bubbles. So, yeah, this is a thumbs down for me.
Yeah.
Would this fall in line with Bare Naked Ladies? Is the same type of
No,
fan base,
different.
John? Different?
Different, because I'd want to punch Bare Naked Ladies a little bit, because I don't like nerd rock, like, at all. Like, that's like a deeper thing. I could drink beers with the guys from Hootie and the Blowfish, and I respect their charitable stuff. They're just basics, you know what I mean? Whereas Bare Naked Ladies are like trying to like tell you how smart and literate they are, which that's like more like they might be giants for me. Matt, where I'm like, no,
I don't
thanks.
think of them that way, but
John feels preached to by the Bear. I just bring that up because they did tour together recently, and it was funny. I was out with some colleagues.
I could see somebody liking both bands, but I don't process them.
It's interesting because this ties into like the discussion that we had, the heated discussion, well, sometimes heated discussion we had last week about Dave Matthews Band. And in the meantime, I went out with some colleagues and we were hanging out, and just after the end of the school year, and some of them were talking about like some concerts that they had seen, and one of them was like, "Oh, I saw Bare Naked Ladies and Hootie and the Blowfish play Fenway Park," and immediately another person was like, "Oh, I would love to see that," and I was like, "Here we go!" Like John, this would be the part where John exits stage left, But at the same time, John, I have to say, the part of me was kind of like, I heard John in the back of my mind going like, yeah, I don't know if these would be people that would be interested in something like Combing the Stacks, right? So yeah. I that was a little bit hitting a little close to home. So while I still feel like you don't want to paint too broad with a brush, the sentiment was there. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. As far as
hate my opinions, but they aren't wrong.
They're not fully wrong. They're partly wrong. So anyway. This album, I remember hearing about this record specifically. It's weird how sometimes this happens, but I had just gotten back. I did a trip in Europe the spring. This is in the summer between sophomore and junior year. And then I had to take a driver's ed class right after I got back. And one of my friends in driver's ed had this record. And she was like, "Oh, this is like this." She loved it. This is a great record, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, who the hell is Hootie and the Blowfish? So like I don't know if I heard it, but I did end up getting it, and this is before like it blew up, because I remember this album because I had it right when it came out. I mean, this was released in the summer of July 1994. I probably got it like not even a month later. It was in my hands like early on. And I don't remember this really becoming a thing until December, January. It was definitely in the winter, and I was like, oh man. And then it was part of me like, I knew about Hootie and the Blowfish back before they were big, that type of thing. Feeling. Exactly. I had this album before any of you posers knew what a Hootie was. And so it's just an interesting, interesting memory that I do have. I do remember liking this record when I got it. It's all, and I can't really disagree with a whole lot of like the description of this type of band. Yeah. But I also think that that's what made them so popular, right? Because the albums, a lot of times, not all the times, but a lot of times, albums that are one of the best-selling albums of all time are striking a chord with obviously all kinds of different people, right? It's not a niche thing. There's some sort of chord that a band like Hootie and the Blowfish is striking that is like a universal, more of a universal type of thing than something like more of a niche band for whatever reason, right? And sometimes it's a time and a place. I don't know if I would say this, maybe in the sense that Josh, you were alluding to, that was in the bio here about the A&R guy who was kind of signing something different than what most labels were doing, which, yeah, props to them for doing that, right? Because the easy thing to do at this time was to sign a grunge band, right? And so this guy's like doing something that's, potentially going to not do well, and then it blows up, right? And it's like, oh, then you struck this thing, and everybody knows Hootie and the Blowfish, right? Like most people, like even Josh knows them, and Josh didn't pay attention to music in the 90s, So if Josh knows about it, that
Can I jump in though, real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Is it really all that transformatory? Because this sounds like Nashville country a little bit.
I didn't say it was. Did I say it was transformatory?
But you get what I'm saying? Like, I could see an A&R guy being like,
okay.
Garth
Yes.
Brooks is really big. And
Okay.
I could see how someone would like rock Garth Brooks, which is basically what Darius Rucker comes full circle in, right? Later as a country singer.
I mean,
Maybe just because the biggest selling artists were not doing stuff like this at that time anyway, right? And I could just see the pressure coming from the record label being like, sign the next Pearl Jam, which is why you got so many bands that try to sound like Pearl Jam,
Yeah.
So no, it's not that transformative.
Was Pearl Jam outselling Clint Black and George Strait and Garth Brooks?
Probably not.
No,
Probably
but
not,
I wouldn't say that this is. Well, yeah, this is kind of not that either, though. It's not like this is
Right.
Clint.
I don't. I mean, I get what you're saying, John, but I don't
Yeah.
feel like they're really that much country. They're that country to me.
No, I mean, there's twang, though, to this.
Yeah.
In some songs. But I mean, I don't want to get too bogged down in that, but I do think that that's I'm just speaking to the universality of an album like this, right? And coming in at this time, and it just hit. People loved it, and I think that there's something about the characterization of the personality of this type of band that you were describing, John, that what you disliked so much about them is what made them so appealing to so many people, right? It's just like, I like people that this is like I could sit down and have a beer with this guy. I feel like this is like my neighbor, or something like that.
Right.
And in the true sense of rock and roll, kind of like us, it's like, yeah, it's a little bit boring, right? Like, because I'm boring, right? If I had a rock band, I'd probably be more like these guys, and I'd be boring as hell, So it's one of the many reasons I'm not a rock star or a musician. So
you were a DJ.
I was a DJ for sure until we got banned. That's right. DJ was more my lane, Josh. I was definitely more in the club sense.
And Toaster.
Toaster, yeah. But as far as this album goes, like, yeah, I enjoyed going back to this. This is a very easy. I listened to this album once this week. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I don't need to listen to.
Right.
I don't
it's
need
not
this.
Complicated.
And part of it, yes, is because I know the album so well because I did have it and I did listen to it a lot when I had it back then. And it's so easy, right? It just puts you right back in. I liked it more than I thought that I would, because certainly over the years, Hootie and the Blowfish is not. Wouldn't say that they've aged well in terms of like people saying I love Hootie and the Blowfish, and then that gives you a bunch of cred amongst rock and roll aficionados.
They're not being reappraised.
Yeah, right. It's just because there's no need to reappraise, because the appraisal, it is what it is, right? There's you don't need to look that deep. It's not like digging to find more meaning or whatever. It's just sometimes music is just straight ahead. It's catchy. It connects people for these themes. And it's not just about like love stuff. I mean, there's some political stuff on here. I wouldn't say it's like the edgiest things you're ever going to have, but clearly there's some targeted messaging at like racism in the South. Clearly that obviously Darius Rucker's black, and part of this was like coming from South Carolina that was still flying the Confederate flag above the state capitol. So there's messages in here that kind of do hit on that. So it's not all just like namby-pamby relationship stuff, But for what it is, it's certainly not going to make any of my top lists, but is it an enjoyable record that I could put on here and there and totally enjoy and go back to 1994, or even just, like connect with somebody else that might get really amped about going to a Hootie and the Blowfish concert? And I bet you that would be a fun concert. I'm sure people are actually. I think I saw Hootie and the Blowfish now that I think about it, but clearly it wasn't that memorable. But I do remember kind of being there and just like, and everybody was having a really good time. So if you're okay with that stuff, then you're good. Then this is right up your alley. But yeah, this is kind of like more for the everyman, which is fine. We need music like that. And I think that this is the type of music that can really connect people at times and make people feel connected, and sometimes when we're not feeling connected. So it's fine enough for me, John. Like I said, I can't disagree with all of your characterizations of it, but I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't bother me that much at all. Like, I'm fine with having everymen be musicians. It's not going to be my go-to. It's not going to be my favorite thing or make top lists, but I certainly have a place for it. So I'm thumbs up on it. I don't even need to go slight thumbs up. I enjoy this record. I would listen to it again.
Yeah, it doesn't offend me. I just want to add two final comments. The first is, I feel like every 5 years there's a band that has the Hootie slot where they sell like a bajillion albums, but they're like, I call it the Eagles lane. And it's like they sold tons of albums, and you're like, I don't get how they sold so many albums, because they seem generic to me. So the Eagles, Foreigner, Nickelback, Vertical Horizon. Like I keep there's Collective Soul, right? There's these bands where I'm just like I just whatever, but they're there, right? They check the box. The other thing is I knew this album was massive and like I processed it massive real time. I knew no one who owned this album, guys. I thought of it as like being for like 40-year-olds. Like that was what I thought. Like I knew none of my contemporaries, like teenagers, even people who liked like shit, right? Like just bad music, right? Like along the way are mostly pop. I don't think I ever recall anyone telling me that they had the Hootie and the Blowfish album or like putting it on, but I still knew all of the songs because they were on the radio and on MTV all the time. And I don't know if I could think of a record this massive. The only other artist from the 90s I could think of who I didn't know anybody who owned their albums, but they also were huge, was like Sheryl Crow, who I like better than this. But that's another. I didn't know anybody who owned a Sheryl Crow album who was not over the age of 35.
Yeah,
but
right.
she also sold tons of albums. So and we're gonna visit her too. So I'll be interested if I have a similar thought because I do process liking Sheryl Crow more. But that's a weird thing about this, in that it just did not end up in the world of people I was hanging out with.
Well, I think, and I read something too that talked about how, the follow up to this, although it did hit number one, Fairweather Johnson, it sold like 2 million copies total, right? And then after that, it was like they kind of fell off the map. And I was reading, I don't know if it was a review or just something else.
Another
but basically,
sexual innuendo too, by the way, which is like seems to be a thing for them.
Also, I didn't read anything. I was looking at your research. I was trying to find out the meaning to back up what you were saying, John. I didn't find anything about it being about a butt crack. So I take your word for it. I couldn't.
I mean, when a band is called
that.
Hootie and the Blowfish has an album called Fairweather Johnson and other called Cracked Rearview, come on.
I don't know. This is your Rorschach.
Yeah, I mean, John's also like describing like whether he likes an album as to what sexual position he thinks about when he listens to it. So I don't know
what this one is. I don't know what this one is. Yeah.
But anyway, the reviewer, the person was saying that that's kind of what was their strength was also their downfall, right? Because it's like you do music like this, you're going to keep doing music like this, right? And you're probably not. And I also, there's another quote that says, I think it was from a TV show I watched, but basically it's like you spend your whole life, bands spend and artists spend their whole life writing their first album, and they spend 6 months writing their second album.
Right,
so like that's
refrain.
right. So that like that second album really speaks to like, does this artist have staying power? And
well, and they're not going to go to like India and learn the sitar or like embrace glam rock because they're music historians, right?
Right. No, they're not doing that.
Keep
either.
playing like they're at a beer-soaked, southern bar.
Bar band, yeah. And so there's people that are going to still come to that, but like for the majority of people that were into this or that bought or went to shows or whatever, it's like, okay, we're moving on to the next thing, right? We're moving on to the next, bigger band or whatever. So I just thought that was kind of interesting because it's like, yeah, that's exactly. They're a one-trick pony, right, in terms of the sound, and they do it well, and there's people that love it, and will still today say like, I just saw Bare Naked Ladies and and Hootie and the Blowfish, and people get all excited, but it's more of a nostalgia thing rather than any staying power beyond that. So yeah, just interesting to point out. So.